So I decided, how can I make my beef noodles more beefy? Well, this is the solution. Really simple, but works so well. So first we're going to start with the beef in the wok. And what I want to do here is really kind of char the beef and evaporate any of the juices. You'll see what I mean. Let's get going. I want a little bit of oil in here. Doesn't matter whether you're doing this in a wok or a pan, the technique is still the same. Now make sure this is like sizzling hot. I want to hear that beef as soon as it hits the pan. Now, one word on the beef. I do like beef with a little bit of fat, and I think it actually works better with flavor and texture. So my beef is a little fatty. You want to see the smoke, hear the sizzle. It should be really dramatic. Spread the beef out and then do your best not to touch it. I just said that and then I touched it, but just listen, don't do what do what I'm doing, just listen and do what I'm saying. Let the beef sit there, and we're going to notice, and I'm starting to see it already, some of that liquid juiciness coming out, and it looks quite wet. So what I want to do is wait until that liquid evaporates, and that's when we're going to start to get the nice chariness on our beef. Trust me. Trying to touch it. It's really hard not to touch things. I'm going to put the spatula down. Not touch it. So when everything starts to smell kind of like a seared hamburger, take a look in the pan and you can see almost all of that liquid is gone. It's quite dry, and I can see some lovely little brown bits starting to happen there. So the magic is happening. I'm just going to restrain myself a little bit longer. Just wait for just a little more chariness. Okay, now get in there and see how we've got some color there. I mean, it won't all be uniformly brown, but those brown charry bits will add so much more flavor and beefiness to the rest of our noodle stir fry. So now I'm going to go in with some onions. And the key here is not to dump everything in here at once. So I want to give my onions some time. Now, onions are just a little soft, starting to char a little bit, so I'm going to add some garlic. So we're kind of doing things a little bit backward, because I would usually add garlic, onion into the oil, and then my protein. Okay, toss that garlic through, and I don't want the garlic to burn, so I'm just going to give that a couple of tosses. And now in with some napa cabbage that I've got here, also known as Chinese cabbage or wombok, depending on where you are. I know, in Australia we have weird names for things. Wombok is such a weird name, but wombok is what we call it in Australia. So there's some information that you might not have known. Toss that around. Right, so now my shredded cabbage. Well, I just added shredded cabbage. So now my shredded carrot. And at this point, you should be looking at a stir fry that is beautifully dry, so not watery. I can smell the beautiful, like, charry beef, and my cabbage and carrot are still a little tender, but my onion is nice and soft and sweet. So we've kind of got all these contrasting textures and flavors and everything already. And we're just going to pause there, turn the heat off. Let's do some noodle work. Now I've got some beautiful fresh Chinese egg noodles here. You could use some prepackaged ramen noodles if you've got them, or even thicker noodles like Hokkien noodles, that's fine as well. The key here is that I don't want to overcook the noodles here, because I want them to cook further in the pan and soak up all that sauce that we're going to add later. So just some boiling water, in the noodles go. And after just a few seconds, I'm going to take the pan straight off over to my wok, turn that beef back on, and get the noodles straight in. And now for all the saucy stuff. I'm going to add in some oyster sauce, some hoisin sauce, some dark sweet soy sauce. This is for a little bit of color. You could just use regular Chinese dark soy sauce as well. It doesn't have to be the sweet kind. And then my little secret ingredient here is a dash of white vinegar, just to cut through the sweetness and add a little bit of kind of lift to the whole flavour. And now toss everything together. A little bit of greenery here. I want some spring onion. Okay, now that is looking really amazing. I love that. And see, we're all concentrated in here because we got rid of all the liquid from the beef. So that sauce is really tasty, really concentrated, sticking to every strand of noodle, every little morsel of beef. Now a little bit more spring onion here, a little sprinkling of sesame seeds. Ooh, and that is one good looking plate of noodles. And of course, I'm going to try it just, you know, to be either just cruel to you guys or just to let you know that, you know, they are really good. You know what hits you straight away is that kind of charry, intense sweetness of the sauce. And then you get the really beefy flavor coming through. Yum. Beef noodles that actually taste beefy. Love it. I hope you guys love this one too. Yum. Lucky I made a huge plate. Now, I love beef noodles just as much as the next person, but do you know what I don't like? I don't like beef noodles where the beef is all dry and tough and not very appetizing. So there's a couple of little tricks that you can do at home to make your beef noodles super special and super tender. So let's get on to that part first of all. I am using, the first thing is that I'm using a tender cut of steak here. So this is a sirloin and I've got it sliced really nice and thin. The thin part is really important, guys, because we want the beef to cook really quickly and get brown really quickly in our wok or our frying pan so that it doesn't stew and become tough. So first up, that's the beef chit chat. And now for some flavor, we want some soy sauce. And then here come the little secret ingredients that are going to make our beef really nice and tender and keep it tender when we're cooking it. First of all, baking soda. So this guy is going to help our beef brown a lot quicker in the frying pan and also kind of tenderize the beef strips a little bit as well. And then I've got some corn flour as well. So that's my other little secret ingredient. And the corn flour, well, that guy kind of gives us a really beautiful kind of silky coating on the outside of the beef that kind of protects it and makes it seem more juicy and tender when you're eating it. So there you go, couple of little tricks there. Now also for more flavor, I want some Chinese cooking wine. And look, if you guys want to keep your cooking alcohol free, you could just use a little bit of apple juice here, would be great. And just give all of that a really good mix. Now, this little mixture here does not need long to work its magic, just a couple of minutes while you get the rest of your stir fry stuff organized. So the next thing we're going to do is our stir fry sauce. So what we need here is very simply some soy sauce, some oyster sauce, a little bit of brown sugar. I like to use the brown sugar here because it has more of a kind of deeper molasses kind of flavor, adds, you know, a little bit more extra special to the stir fry, but you could use white sugar as well if that's all you've got. A little bit of Hoisin cooking wine here as well, and some chicken stock. Now just give that a mix, and we are ready to get stir frying. I just need some oil into a hot pan or a hot wok. Make sure you give yourself a lot of room here, so like a big pan if you're not using a wok or a large wok. That way, when we get our beef in, we can really spread it out. Okay, I'm gonna go in with my onions first, and just toss those around a little, just give them a little bit of color. And now in with my beef. Now with that beef, you want to get it spread out straight away. So by spreading the beef out, we're getting it nice and seared and crusty on the outside rather than being all clumped up and stewing and getting tough. So there's a whole, method to the madness here, everyone. So just let that beef sear for a minute or so on that first side, and then get in there and flip that beef over. And now that I'm starting to get some color, now I'm going to add in my aromatics. So I'm going to go in with my garlic and some ginger. And doing it this way means that we're not allowing our garlic to burn or the ginger to burn while we're getting that hard sear on the beef. So it's really important to, go in the right order here. Now, just let those guys make friends in there as you're flipping everything over. Oh, that smell, garlic, onion, ginger, the holy trinity of Asian ingredients all together always makes me so happy. Now, we need our noodles. So these noodles are pre-cooked, they're ready to stir fry. I'm just gonna toss them in, and then in with our stir fry sauce. Now, you just need everything in here to kind of get acquainted. You want that sauce to kind of thicken up a little bit, get nice and glossy. And then just toss through your spring onions. And look at that beautiful little bit of magic that we've created in there, that glossy sauce, that beautiful beef, which is looking nice and tender and glossy and yummy. Too many glossies. Anyway, you get what I mean. It's looking really magic. I'm gonna get this right out onto a serving plate. Now just a little bit of extra greenery on top, some spring onion. And there you go, guys. One very simple but very technically perfect beef noodle stir fry. And by technically perfect, I mean that beef should be super tender. Should we have a look? Let's see. Sometimes it's just the very simple things done very well, which brings so much joy. That beef is melt in your mouth tender. Each little strand of noodle is beautifully coated. The sauce is perfect consistency. Everything just bringing joy. First up, let's talk about the beef. So I have a mixture of beef short rib and chuck steak for this one. Okay, so the beef short rib has the bone, that's great. That's gonna add some extra sort of gelatin into the mix. And the chuck steak, you're really looking for some bits and pieces that have that nice marbling through the center. All right, so first thing we need to do is add a little bit of oil to my saucepan here. And I want to season each little piece of beef with a bit of salt. Loving care for every single little piece that we have here. I'm going to sear this beef in batches. Now, this searing part has nothing to do with sealing in juices or anything like that. That's just not the way, technically, food sciencey way that cooking meat works. What we're doing here though is we're creating flavor. There's a chemical reaction that happens when meat gets nice and brown. And without getting all food science nerdy on you guys, that is what's going to give us the extra in our dish. So I don't want these guys to stew. I just want them to get really nice and caramelized and brown. That's why I'm going to do it in batches. Now take a look at all that magic that's happened in the bottom of that pan, all that brown stuff. That's exactly what we want. So I'm going to add in just a little bit more oil because I didn't get quite as much fat from that beef as I wanted. And I'm going to add in some onions. And at this point, I use my wooden spoon to really start scraping up some of that flavor from the bottom of the pan. We're going to deglaze the pan a bit later, so you'll see all of that lovely flavor will lift off the bottom. But for the moment, I'm going to add in a little bit of garlic. And just while those onions are softening up, I'm going to slice some ginger. Okay, here we go with that. The smell already is so magical. Now to get all of that stuff off the bottom of the pan, we're going to deglaze it with some Chinese Shaoxing wine. So you can get this now in a lot of Asian sections in regular supermarkets, or try your Asian grocer. It's basically just getting that liquid into that bottom of the pan to lift off all that brown flavor. Okay, now really get in there with your spoon and lift off all of that flavor from the bottom. At this point, I'm going to add my beef back in. Okay, and don't waste any of those resting juices. Get that in there as well. Now for all the additional stuff, I want some soy sauce and some dark soy sauce. That's going to give us this really lovely, deep, dark color. And some brown sugar. Now for the spices. So I've got some whole star anise and a cinnamon stick, and I'm using some of my homemade Chinese 5-spice. You can find the video for that on my YouTube channel. The flavor is intense. So a little sprinkling of that. And now here's where we go a little bit rogue. So this is not a traditional ingredient, but tomato paste has a huge amount of umami and savory flavor. It's like concentrated flavor bomb. So even though it's not traditional, we're gonna put that in and get all of that lovely stuff mixed together. Now lid on and just let that gently simmer away for about 90 minutes or until that beef is really fork tender. Now let's see what kind of epicness has happened while we've been away. That smell, that beef, so delicious. Okay, so let's get these spices out first of all. I've got those 2 pieces of star anise, remember? And my cinnamon stick as well. And now let's deal with the beef situation. So I want to take these bones out, obviously, and let's just take a look. That beef is so soft and tender. That complete bone just falls out. Amazing. I just want some nice chunky bits of beef here. So I'm going to slice through this beef and it is so tender. Okay, now this beautiful and luscious broth that we have going on here, I want to thicken it up with a little bit of corn flour and water. Mix that together a little bit. Okay, now I just want that to simmer away for a couple more minutes until I get a really thick, luscious, glossy sauce. Just as that's starting to bubble, I can see a little bit of the sort of beef fat and oil that's accumulating on the top there. So I'll just scoop some of that off. It's not really very much, but it's easy to take off. Okay, so we're at the point now where our braising liquid is now the most amazing, delightful gravy sauce consistency. So I'm gonna put all of that beef back in. Now just stir all of that beef through. Okay, so to serve this up, I have some Chinese egg noodles. I just cooked them in some boiling water and just tossed them with some sesame oil so they didn't get too sticky. And we want some of that amazing beef. Okay, and I want just a little bit of greenery and crunch. So I'm gonna add some cucumber on the side. I want a little sprinkling of some spring onion on the top. And then this is totally optional, but you guys know that I love my spice. So I'm using some of my homemade chili oil just to finish off with some extra epic flavor.